Within the first chapter of our New Testament, an angel comes to visit a very confused Joseph, whose fiancée had just found out she was pregnant. The angel addresses his deepest concerns and tells him to name the child Jesus. The writer Matthew then lets us in on a secret. This birth would fulfill the prophecy of Immanuel. The word Immanuel in Greek is just a combination of Hebrew words. Im means with, anu means us, and El means God, so God with us. But what does that have to do with the birth of Jesus? Well, the story of Immanuel starts way back in the Garden of Eden. There, God established sacred space on the earth, placed people in the garden to serve him, and then dwelled in their midst. He was Yahweh, God, right there with them, just the way he intended. But then, they sinned. They were expelled from the garden, away from his presence, and humanity began a downward spiral with no clear end in sight. Then came a man named Abraham. Yahweh called him to be a light to the nations, along with a promise to bless him. However, all along the way, he reminded him of his presence. Go to the land I will show you. I am your shield. To Abraham's son Isaac, he reiterated his promise, I will be with you. To his son Jacob, he said it again, I am with you. Even when Jacob's son Joseph was sold into slavery, we are reminded the Lord was with him. When God rescued his people from the land of Egypt, a pillar of cloud and fire stood as a constant witness to his presence, and Yahweh's presence was the only thing that kept the people bold enough to continue their journey. When Joshua took up leadership, God promised him, I will be with you, I will not leave you, and I will not forsake you. When God raised up judges, each time, God was with the judge as they saved the people. Kings like David only experienced success because of God's presence. Even the wicked kings were often reminded of God's presence. King Ahaz, a particularly terrible one, struggled during his reign with threats from nations all around him. But God gave a sign to Ahaz. A virgin would have a baby, and she would call his name Immanuel, which means God is with us. The people may have abandoned God, but God had not abandoned the people. Yet in the later days, when the nation of Israel was kicked out of their land, hope began to wane. People questioned the presence of God in their midst and wondered if he would ever act in history again. God seemed noticeably absent, and the continuous presence of the Lord, like in the garden, seemed like a distant dream. This is what makes these words that begin our New Testament so shocking. This new baby's birth signified that God had not, in fact, abandoned his people. Immanuel meant that which was lost in the Garden of Eden had begun to be restored. God was here, and his presence was now permanent. This little boy, Jesus, would grow up in obscurity, minister to the masses, die a criminal's death, and raised to new life, opening the way for God's presence to all who would turn to him. In fact, the writer Matthew records Immanuel's final words on earth. I am with you always, to the very end of the age. Immanuel is more than just a prophecy. It's a promise of God's presence forever.